Hello and welcome to our career interview with Mr. Tony Pitkin. Joining me today for this interview is Greenville student Olivia Russo. Mr. Pitkin, if you could start us off, tell us what your profession is and a little bit about the journey of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, it's a weird one for sure. I work as an implementation engineer at a cloud-based software company, a startup, if you will, in San Francisco, but it's kind of not a startup in the sense of like 5 people working in a basement, though. I mean, probably there's multiple people working in basements with work from home right now. But we have 180 employees, and I joined about 1.5 years ago. My journey to what I do right now is kind of bizarre. I originally went to school for sound recording and music technology. Was actually working at a couple decent sized studios, worked with a guy who recorded Madonna's Like a Virgin for a few months. And it was through working with that guy that I realized everyone in that business was completely, absolutely insane and worked like 18-hour days through the power of multiple different things in their life. And I realized that world was not something I wanted to be surrounded by. And so I started out of college working at a company called Autotask based in East Greenbush, who now is called Datto. And I worked as a support rep for their software platform there, and then eventually got a promotion and moved out to San Jose, California. And then eventually now I'm in San Francisco at a different company. So not exactly what you would think of someone to work at a software company and went to school for music. So
an interesting path to get to where you are. Nothing wrong with that. Can you tell us what's a typical day like for you? What's a work day include? What's that look like?
Yeah, so my role is a bit of a hybrid at the company, but what I do is I help, once we get customers who say, I want to purchase your software, they come through our team called onboarding in our world, and onboarding helps them actually implement the software. Well, so onboarding are people who are like experts in figuring out how to use the software itself, but what they aren't experts in is the technical components of how they're going to connect a bunch of different pieces into their software. And so my role is to help them architect the solutions of how they connect those different components into their software to create a workflow that makes their business actually work.
I have the next question, right? Okay. What do you love most about your job?
Todd's going to laugh as soon as I say this. I'm a talker. That hasn't changed since I knew him. So what I love about my job is it's an entirely customer-facing role. There's no part of my job, I should say there's a very small part of my job that is not being on a meeting, talking to a customer and brainstorming and solutioning things live. And so what I love most about the job is I like the nerdy crap that most people probably don't care about, but I like talking to people who don't know that world and watching the satisfaction they get from having someone help them solve it.
Okay. And what kind of skills are needed for this type of job?
A lot of troubleshooting and creative thinking. Because my role is like almost in the domain of software engineer, I'm working with a lot of people who have varying degrees of technical aptitude. And so the other skill that I would say I use besides just troubleshooting is almost like technical translator. So I have to find a way to take things that maybe won't make any sense to someone who's, like think of talking to your mom or dad and trying to explain something technical to them, but then like put them in a suit. And that's literally what I do some days. It's like I have to try to explain these very technical concepts to someone who's like, I don't know how to unlock my iPhone. And so like the technical translation ability is probably the most difficult, but also most crucial skill.
So along those lines, you kind of just spoke to this, but you can elaborate a little bit. What are some challenges that you faced? And it could be day-to-day in your current role, or it could just be what are some challenges you faced along the way? I know you kind of shifted career paths at one point. Just talk to us about challenges you faced and overcome.
Yeah, like without a doubt, just to be totally transparent, the biggest challenge is constantly questioning if what you are doing with your career is what you think you're supposed to be doing. And like that challenge will never go away. And I've talked to a bunch of my friends, and that challenge is true for most of them too. Like a fun fact for you to know about working in software, most people didn't go to school for it. You end up here, and you end up here through like weird paths. There are coworkers I have who are like, were full-time musicians. There are coworkers I have who were like professional video gamers who were like, I want to write software instead. There are coworkers who I have who went to school for like journalism and PR and ended up working in sales roles at a software company. So it like everyone's path to get here is different. So I think the most challenging thing is being confident that what you're doing is what you believe you're supposed to be doing. And that's just this constant like mental check that's going to run through your head. Just to counter that so that you don't feel like, well, why would I ever go into this if I'm always going to question if I'm supposed to be doing it? The rewarding part is that constantly going up against that battle is probably one of the most rewarding feelings compared to if I was sitting at like a 9-to-5 being an accountant. Both my parents were accountants. I probably would not feel that same level of satisfaction because it's a really defined path. Every day is going to be exactly the same. And so even though it's super challenging that every day of my job is completely different and I have no idea what technical hurdle a customer might throw at me, that is actually also the most rewarding part.
Okay, what advice would you have for a student or really anybody going into this profession?
So this is like a weird one for me to answer because now I'm going to sound like a geezer, and I'm not. I'm like 27, but like I feel like the scope of your guys' world is so different than when I was in middle school and high school. Like, to give you perspective, if you're sitting here and you're like, oh, maybe I want to be a software engineer, maybe I want to write things, like we didn't have online training courses when I was in middle school or high school that taught you how to code. That wasn't a thing. You just sort of like, let me take a step back. It was called MySpace. You would build a MySpace and you would write HTML to build your own little MySpace website. And that was your idea of like learning to code. And it would be like, oh, look, I put a glittery text font next to my top 8 friends. And now I'm dating myself because none of you will know what I'm talking about. But look up pictures if you've never heard of MySpace. I think like that is probably the best thing you could do for yourself, which is like just download an app on your phone and just start poking around. And if you find satisfaction answering the like technical problem solving questions, you probably might want to explore this field.
What middle school or high school classes did you take to lead you to this career path? I know it wasn't like your original.
My practical answer should be math and science. My actual answer is I have no idea anymore what you guys actually learned related to this. I feel like I've heard, Todd, maybe you can correct me on this. Aren't kids actually getting some level of exposure now? Maybe not in this current generation, but I think they're actually starting to teach kids coding now at early ages, aren't they?
Correct. So we have a program here at the elementary school where students start working with very basic coding practices. So yes.
Yeah. And so my guess, Olivia, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, is that you also probably did not grow up where that was being enforced. You're probably also in this transitional generation where like you might have gotten some exposure to it. You might have gotten none. Is that fair to say?
I got a little bit, but not too much. My little sister is definitely getting more than me.
Yeah, and you feel like you're getting gypped, right? Like, just to be clear, I feel the same way about your generation. So it all recycles. Like, we're all going to be grumpy old people one day. Just, look at Todd. No, but in actuality, like, if you find math and science to be something that you're actually good at and you find it challenging but rewarding to solve the problems, I would say algebra was actually probably one of the courses where was the first time that I realized my brain functioned in that like tactical problem solving way, because you have an equation where you know some things and you don't know others. And your sole goal in that problem is to figure out what you don't know at all costs. right? Like algebra, if I remember correctly, it would be like these page-long equations where you're like filling out a bunch of variables and you try a bunch of things, and the teacher would literally not care how you got to it. They would just care that you solve it. And that is quite literally the direct translation of what my job is like.
Well, Tony, you've given us some great words of wisdom, and I do applaud you for taking strengths that you had even in middle school. So you being aware of your communication, your interest in communicating, and you like to interact with people and talking. I think that's critical because you know that that's a strength for you and you turn it into part of what you do every day. So that's awesome. We are coming to the end of our time with Mr. Pitkin. So is there anything else you would like to share for students that will be watching this? You've shared plenty of great information, but anything else before we wrap it up?
No, other than to say, if you are considering this world and you're sitting here going, well, I do like problem solving and I do like computer world and I like that type of stuff. The barrier to entry these days to learn that is very low, in the sense that like there's so much information that is free and available to you to do at like little to no cost. If you just go to the internet and type in best free code academies, you literally already are off to the races. There's all sorts of online resources. Like, just to give you transparency, it's something that I never really did and have picked up along the way. And I myself am still going through it now just to try and make sure I keep up with all those around me.
Great. Well, Tony, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And best of luck as you continue on in your career path.
Thanks.